It was a cold October night when Sarah finished her late shift at the hospital. The corridors had been strangely quiet that evening, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She grabbed her coat, stepped outside, and walked to the small parking lot where her car waited. The streets were almost empty, only a thin fog crawling along the ground. She hated working nights, but tonight something felt different, heavier, as if the air itself carried a warning. Driving home, she took the usual route, a long road that cut through an old forest on the edge of town. The trees loomed tall on either side, their branches arching overhead like skeletal fingers. Halfway through, her headlights caught something in the distance. A figure was standing by the roadside, unmoving, facing the trees. At first she thought it was just a lost hiker, but as the car drew closer, she noticed the figure was wearing outdated clothes, something from decades ago, a long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. She slowed down instinctively, her eyes locked on him, but just as she passed, the figure turned its head toward her. She gasped. The face was pale, eyes hollow and dark, the mouth stretched into something that didn't look like a smile at all. Her heart pounded as she pressed the accelerator, desperate to leave it behind. But after only a few minutes, her headlights caught him again. The same figure, standing on the roadside, facing the trees. She knew it was impossible. She had driven far too fast for anyone to appear ahead of her like that. This time she didn't slow down. She kept her eyes forward, gripping the wheel until her knuckles turned white. She whispered to herself, "Just get home, just get home." Finally, the forest ended, and the lights of her neighborhood came into view. Relief washed over her as she pulled into her driveway, shutting off the engine. She hurried inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, trying to calm her breathing. After a few minutes, she convinced herself she had been imagining things. Exhaustion and long shifts could play tricks on the mind. She made tea, sat on the couch, and turned on the television to drown out the silence. But then, from the corner of her eye, she noticed movement outside the window. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned her head. There, standing perfectly still on the other side of the street, was the same figure in the dark coat and hat, facing her house. She rushed to close the curtains. But before the fabric fell shut, she thought she saw its head tilt upward, staring directly into her window. Hours passed. She fell asleep on the couch, trying to convince herself it wasn't real. But at 3:17 a.m., she woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, heavy. She lived alone. Heart racing, she grabbed her phone and switched on the flashlight. The narrow beam cut through the darkness, but the hallway was empty. She whispered, "Who's there?" Her voice trembled. No answer. She took a cautious step forward, the wooden floor creaking under her feet. She checked every room, the kitchen, the bathroom, even the tiny storage closet. Nothing. Finally, she returned to the living room, her body tense, every sense screaming at her to leave. That's when she saw it. Her front door was wide open, the lock broken, the night air pouring inside. And just beyond the threshold, standing under the dim street light, was the figure. This time, it was closer. Much closer. She could finally see its face clearly, gray skin stretched too tight, hollow eyes that seemed to pull her in, and a mouth that opened slowly, impossibly wide. She screamed and slammed the door, pushing the lock into place even though it was broken. She dragged a chair against it, her hands shaking violently. The footsteps began again, this time outside the door. Slow. Deliberate. Each step echoed as though the figure knew she had nowhere left to run. Suddenly, silence. For a moment, she thought it was gone. She dared to move the curtain a little, peeking outside. The street was empty. No figure. No sound. Nothing. Her shoulders sagged with relief, and she turned back into the room. That was when she froze. The figure was already inside, standing in the corner of her living room. No sound, no movement, just standing there, as if it had always been part of the room. The air grew colder. Her phone slipped from her hand, the flashlight rolling across the floor. In the shifting beam of light, she watched in horror as the figure began to move toward her, not walking, but gliding, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Her scream never left her throat. The next morning, neighbors found her house empty, the door still locked from the inside. The only sign that Sarah had ever been there was her phone, lying in the middle of the floor, the flashlight still on, casting a beam toward the corner where the wallpaper was torn, as though something had forced its way through the wall. No one ever saw Sarah again. But sometimes, drivers on that lonely forest road report seeing a woman in hospital scrubs standing silently by the trees, her eyes hollow, her mouth stretched into something that isn't a smile at all.